One day, because it was top of news for about a week, I was holding the Globe and Mail newspaper, and on the front cover were the kids from Dene High School sitting around what looked like a bonfire, and they were calling it a forgiveness circle. And I was absolutely struck by the fact that they were pivoting to forgiveness. In this time of tragedy, and I have to tell you, La Loche is a one-road town. There was one road in, one road out. There are no banks, there are no grocery stores per se. It's almost a trading post scenario, and a place where you can buy lettuce for 30 bucks a head if you can afford it. It's that kind of situation. It's a fly-in community, so food has to be flown in, and it's very expensive. The people there still hunt, they trap, they forage for berries still. That's the situation. So it really was something that the one area, the school, which acted almost like a community center and was now riddled with bullets and taken away, still everybody thought we've got to forgive. And the idea and the culture was, if somebody does something wrong, then we're all responsible. So that kid who said he had been bullied and this is why he acted that way, they said, well, you know, it literally takes a village and we didn't do a good job. That's what they were doing. And I thought, this is extraordinary. The other thing that I noticed was that one of the kids who was front and center was wearing a Toronto Raptors cap. And I'm a huge basketball fan. I've had tickets with my dad for 18 seasons. And I noticed it and I thought, I wonder if the Raptors have seen this, and I wonder if maybe they could help this town that is in distress, this one road town. And so here's what I knew, that as a reporter, there's a neutrality that has to be maintained. And to get involved in a story, and this would be getting involved in a story, it's not something that's looked upon as a positive. Let's just put it that way. So I couldn't call my newsroom and say, how do I get in touch with Marci Ien, President GM of the Raptors? Know that he's involved in charity. How do I do this? So I started making up email addresses. I tried different ones. mujuri@raptors.com, masai.ujuri. I tried them all. And in the subject line, I put school shooting, and I put my phone number, and I said, can we talk about this? And one of them worked because he called me back and said, how could he help? And that started a journey that has been 3 years in the making. So 6 months after all of that happened, the shooting was January 22nd, 2016, Canada AM ended. And I had left that with Masai, hadn't heard back. AM ends and life goes on, and I'm in a tailspin wondering, okay, what next? What do we do? Went away for a while to try and find myself and figure out what it was I wanted to do. I wasn't sure. But the one thing that I knew was that I wanted to use my voice a certain way, that I had been in this industry long enough. I had gone through enough. I had learned enough. And I wanted to share my stories and mentor more and know that I was leaving the proper legacy, basically. So all of a sudden, I'm guest co-hosting on The Social. It isn't a done deal that I'm going to be a permanent host. And Masai comes on as a guest. And after the interview with the ladies, he said, you know, Marci, I haven't forgotten about the kids. And I said, I'm so happy about that. And he said, I'm also of the opinion that it's better to go in after the cameras leave and after everybody's gone, see if we can do something. We should talk. So we started to talk. This was a very busy time. We decided that we should get in touch with the school and figure out what the school needed. And bear in mind, I'm no longer in the newsroom, so I figure I can do whatever I want. That I can talk to whoever I want and help whoever I want and use my voice. I am now on a show where opinion matters and I can voice it every day. Also found out that that school has an incredible sports history. And Greg, who is now 66 years old from Dryden, Ontario, but has been in La Loche for 40 years, was also the coach. He coached all the volleyball team, basketball teams, which is why there's such a huge sports legacy. The gymnasium in that school is called the Greg Hatch Gymnasium. He's an extraordinary man. So he said, listen though, we don't want just a handout. If you want to know us, you got to come see us. And I said, pardon? Because thinking we could just send stuff. And he said, no, like, if you want to know who we are, you've got to see who we are. So I went back to Masai and I said, I think we have to go to La Loche. And he said, what? And I said, I think we have to go. Greg makes a really good point, and I think we need to go. So I have to just paint this picture for you, because this is now November. We are incredibly busy. I co-host the Santa Claus Parade. I tell you this because there are all these things in November, right? So I'm co-hosting the Santa Claus Parade. So that's one weekend. We're doing a Jan Arden special that particular month as well, so that's another weekend. We're still doing the show 5 days a week. There was something else going on. Oh yes, and the Grey Cup. And we were on the field doing the pre-show for the Grey Cup, and then during the Grey Cup we were doing something. So all these things were happening. I was working 7 days a week through that November, but we had to get there. So it was the Monday after Grey Cup, and we didn't tell anybody. And Messiah and I got on a plane, and we flew from Toronto to Fort McMurray, and then took a little plane, and I don't even know how we got there because the cloud cover was so bad. I at one point, I was thinking, do I write notes to my family now in case, because I'm serious, it was unbelievable. We just sat there going, we just need to get there. So got there, Greg greeted us, and that day, we spoke to the kids, we talked to them, we talked to staff, and we saw who they were. And getting back to Fort McMurray that night, took the small plane back, we sat in an Earl's restaurant in that airport, watching the Toronto Raptors play while their GM was sitting in the Earl's with me. And people were sitting there trying to get in touch with him. They were texting, where are you? And we were going, look at this. But we sat there and we thought, we're going to bring some kids to Toronto. We are going to have some kids from Dene experience what life is like outside of where they live. I know that they ran out of ballots on reserves across this country in that election, the federal election. I know that Indigenous people came out for this government in record numbers. And here's a school that when Messiah and I went there, we couldn't walk through the front door because it was boarded up and there were bullet holes everywhere. It hadn't been fixed. We got there almost a year later and it hadn't been fixed. We had to go through the side door. And I thought, what would this do to kids mentally showing up for school? They're just trying to find a new normal, and yet they have to see this, reminders of this everywhere. The office is still unusable, it shot up. What does this do to a young mind? And they're already facing all these other challenges, and there's still this. And the whole notion of that community being forgotten was a real thing. And so I thought, I don't know how to be getting in touch with prime ministers and such, but I do know that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, follows me on Twitter. So on a whim, I DM'd her and I said, Katie, happy holidays. It was Boxing Day and all. Do you think that we could speak about something? And she got back to me with her email address. And I basically wrote her a letter telling her everything that I told you, except to say that the kids were on their way in a couple of weeks, and that we thought that, this wasn't our story to tell. It's not our story to tell. But the kids will be in Toronto, and they'll be telling their own story. And we want them to. And would there be someone that they could talk to? Because they do feel that they've been forgotten. So I thought maybe, the Indigenous Affairs Minister, somebody that they could speak to and tell their story about life where they live. And in doing so, tell the rest of Canada about what they were going through. Because it's very much out of sight, out of mind where they live. Didn't hear a thing. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, I probably was too long-winded. What have I done? I'm such a bleeding heart. This whole thing. And so got back to work, and it was a week before they were meant to come. And I'm sitting there drinking a cup of tea in my office at work, and bing, this email comes in. And it's the director of operations for the PMO. And he asks if he can speak to me. And I email back, absolutely. So he calls and he says, Marci, just want you to know that Katie got your email. She's at the UN right now, so I thought, okay, that's a good excuse. She's at the UN right now, but she shared the email with a lot of us. We've read the letter. So what is it that you want? What can we do? And I said, well, I just want somebody to speak to these kids, and I want them to be validated because they just haven't been at all. And he said, well, the Prime Minister will be doing town halls during that time. And it so happens there's one scheduled for Toronto. And I almost dropped my teacup. I almost dropped my teacup. The timing was unbelievable. This had been pre-planned. This is before we had planned our stuff. But here's how it went down, okay? So the kids, along with Greg and Martha Morin, his admin assist, arrived on a Thursday. They came and they were on our show that Thursday. Messiah and I were almost guests that day, so I was a guest on my own show. And the ladies interviewed us, and then the kids got microphones, and they were able to speak about what the last year was like for them. They went home to sleep, well, not home, but to the hotel to sleep that Ryerson had provided for them after the show. And then on Friday morning, went back to Ryerson for an amazing science exhibit, as well to meet the president of the school who told his extraordinary story coming from Algeria and all the things that he had gone through, and now president of Ryerson University. And then they were bussed over to BioSteel Center, where they had a beautiful lunch. There were flashing lights, much like the greeting that you had for me. Thank you for that. There were flashing lights everywhere saying, welcome, Denny High School, all over BioSteel. And then the Prime Minister of this country walked into BioSteel Center, gave him a quick tour, and then for 45 minutes in the players' locker room, closed door, I was there, they had a discussion, the leader of this country, about what they had gone through. He was very candid, they were very candid. Then we opened the doors and there was press everywhere, and kids had a bit of a basketball game, and it was extraordinary. They reopened the school on Friday morning, so no more bullet holes. Walked through the front door this time, and it was great. You guys, you know, I was accompanied by the Dean of Sciences, former Dean of Sciences, Imogen Coe, at Ryerson. She is extraordinary in her own right. One of the really celebrated scientists in our country. And she is from Uxbridge, Ontario, where Adam, the teacher that was shot at La Loche, is from. So this was really special to her. And she has helped to bring a robotics program to La Loche, sciences to La Loche. There's a robotics team coming from Denny High School that will compete in Calgary against other high schools later this year. So much has happened. Loblaw got on board. We just called everybody. Loblaw got on board and has provided a modular farm so that the kids, it's really neat, the kids can actually, it's almost a course in learning how to operate that and grow their own food. So no need for the $30 head of lettuce, you know, and it's something that can help the community as well. So much has happened in 3 years. I tell you this story, and when I thought about coming to talk to you today, I thought, well, it's probably the story of La Loche that tells you about who I am and where I am now.